Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being on time. My name is Ivan Vickers. I'm one of the committee members of the Special Interest Group for the IoD for Africa. And I welcome you this afternoon. We have an interesting lineup. Hopefully it'll be thought-provoking. It'll stimulate some thought. And more importantly, actually, maybe even develop into some people doing business with each other, which would be a great thing. So just to get started, we will be recording the session just for us to be able to revisit it and more importantly, actually look to see what we can improve for events going forward. That said, we're going to be, our speakers today are going to be Duncan Bonnet, who's the director of Africa House, a specialist African research and consulting business. He's been involved with both corporate and government and has experience physically or himself in person of 25 country assignments, but knows sub-Saharan Africa really, really well. We will then follow that with Brian Hall, who's the chair of the World Trade Group for the Institute of Directors. Unfortunately, Gideon Maas, Professor Gideon Maas, will not be joining us today. Unfortunately, he was rushed into hospital yesterday with a heart condition and sends his apologies. But we'll get him back at another stage because he's recently started he's actually the executive director of the International Center for Transformational Entrepreneurship at Coventry University, but he's also created the African Institute for Transformational Entrepreneurship. And that's something that he's been rolling out with universities within Africa. And then we'll have Professor Jyoti Chaudhry, who holds a position as Professor of Information Systems at the University of Hertfordshire. She has a lot of experience in investigating social inclusion and adaptation of IT or ICT into societies and marginal groups. And so that's pretty much where we are. So just to get started and make sure that we stay on time, I'm going to introduce Duncan. As I said earlier, he's from Africa House. He has a wealth of experience and knowledge about Africa. And what's really important with Duncan is that he's one of these people who has his finger on the pulse. So the topic for today is actually innovation in business for Africa. So that's kind of where we're going to start. That's where we're going to focus. It's a broad subject. And with that, Duncan, if you could unmute yourself, that'd be great.
Many thanks, Ivan, and good afternoon, everyone. It's nice to join you from here in Johannesburg. Ivan, I assume you'll tell me when I've got a couple of minutes left, so that
I will.
When to shut up. Okay, I think to put innovation in Africa in context, we need to just take a little bit of a step back and understand that Africa is an incredibly large place. It is a very diverse place in terms of the number of countries, languages, religions, every metric that you can think of, but also levels of development. And I think this is something that we really need to take cognizance of. When we talk about 1.2 billion people across 54 countries, most of in terms of innovation and in terms of ICT and development, most is concentrated in a few countries. So countries like Egypt, Morocco, South Africa, Nigeria, and Kenya as well would account for probably over 50% of all of the innovation hubs and development across the continent. That doesn't mean to say that there aren't other areas of opportunity and development as well. Countries like Rwanda have taken a conscious decision to become ICT hubs. And to become, in many respects, the drivers of innovation and development across Africa for Africa. So, but you still have those concentrations of R&D. Over 70% of innovation R&D takes place in the big 4 or 5 markets across the continent that I mentioned a little bit earlier. And as a result, you will have many countries where there would initially appear to be a great opportunity, but perhaps on closer investigation don't bear that out. So I think that's the first point, is to look at that and understand that. Africa has around about 18% of the world's population, but accounts for about 0.5% of R&D spend on innovation. So you can see again, there is that lag factor that we have on the continent here, and it is something that probably isn't going to be overcome in the immediate future as a percentage of global R&D. But what you can see, and what you're seeing all the time across the continent, is that there is quite a lot of innovation happening around Africa, and that goes things like banking, the introduction of M-Pesa in Kenya as the first sort of smartphone-based payment system is a uniquely African invention, and it has spread across to other countries and continents as well. And that kind of innovation, I think, is where the excitement around Africa is. 10 years ago, there were probably less than 30% of Africans had access to a useful mobile device. That percentage is probably well over 50% now, and it's growing rapidly every single year. That said, one of the issues around greater expansion is the cost of telecoms in Africa. Internet connections are still amongst the highest in the world. In fact, in South Africa in particular, we suffer from very high data costs and internet connection costs. STEM as a career, your science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, still has a fairly low penetration rate across the continent. Roughly a third of Africans cannot read or write, which means that you're sitting with a population that doesn't have the kind of access and opportunity that you have in other parts of the world. So there are those issues. Obviously, in many countries, you're still migrating from 3G to 4G. We haven't got as far as 5G yet, never mind the introduction of 6G. So these kinds of things act as natural barriers to the development of innovation in Africa. But we also sit on the cusp. If I look at when I started doing research on the continent in the mid-90s, there were very few cell phones at all. One would travel to Lusaka from here in Johannesburg, and everything was done by landline or fax. So every lunchtime you would rush back to your hotel and see if faxes had arrived for you to be able to take part in meetings. Now, of course, everything is done by WhatsApp and by LinkedIn and so on and so forth. So there has been that progression. A country like the DR Congo, or Zaire, when I first visited it under Mobutu Sese Seko, had, for a population then of around about 65 million people, had 40,000 connected working landlines. So it was almost impossible to do anything in the country. Today, of course, that has changed completely. And so most Africans, rather than going the route of buying a landline and getting that installed, have moved completely to mobile technology. Many Africans will not use desktop computers for the most part. It's tablets or mobile devices. So in some respects, we've actually leapfrogged that technological barrier. We're seeing it across many countries. Brick and mortar banks are closing in favor of online banking and online banking facilities and that kind of applicability. So what we're seeing is that in many respects, innovation in Africa is leapfrogging your traditional models of how to do it and the methodologies of going about it. And we are starting to see that there are these hubs of development. A lot of venture capital is starting to flow into the sector in Africa, particularly into countries like Nigeria, Kenya, Egypt, South Africa, and Tunisia to a degree as well. And that is across the board, whether it is within your retail, so your online retail facilities, building those kinds of networks and development, or into countries like Rwanda and Uganda, where you're now using drone technology for the delivery of medicines and other commodities into inaccessible areas. We're starting to see this kind of innovation. And in fact, a Rwandan company with Japanese finance is a world first in terms of drone delivery of medicines across an entire country. So you can see that there is that kind of innovation that's starting to happen across Africa. And I think that we really sit on the cusp of very exciting developments as we see more and more bandwidth across the continent and the cost of connectivity dropping very quickly across the continent. We will see more and more of this. There are roughly 650 innovation hubs. Konza City in Kenya being a very good example of one. The Korean Innovation Authority has recently invested there. And as a result, you can start to see the development of homegrown innovation in Africa. That said, there is still a really good opportunity for companies from outside of Africa to introduce technologies and joint innovations with African companies across the continent. And that goes whether it's in agriculture and literally from farm to fork, or whether it is in mining and remote access to mining locations and oil and gas and so on, or into the broader urban development and urban environment in terms of smart cities and smart developments across that. So I think that for me, just as an opening gambit, kind of sums up where we are. We've come off a very low base. We're far behind the rest of the world, but we're moving very quickly and I think very innovatively towards becoming a far larger player on the global innovation, R&D and ICT scene. Thanks, Ivan. I hope that was
brilliant and on time. Awesome. That was very interesting, enlightening. Nice to hear that there are these innovation hubs and things are starting to move. So I've just got a couple of questions here. One was from Alistair Elder. How do you see the AfCFTA supporting what you're talking about?
I think the African Continental Free Trade area that Alistair's talking about, firstly, it's still in its infancy. It hasn't been implemented as yet for the most part, but it has the real opportunity to allow countries and sectors that are organized and developed to spread across the continent. So I do think you'll see, for instance, if you're sitting in South Africa, you have very limited access into the Nigerian market at the moment, or into key markets in East Africa. The Continental Free Trade Area will that around. And similarly with countries, say in Egypt or Morocco or Nigeria into South Africa. So it will start to open up a continental market of 1.2, 1.3 billion people. And it will start to have that impact of creating regional hubs of development and innovation and export into the broader African marketplace.
Okay, that's really interesting. And then I have another question here from B. Says his question is this: does the 0.5% R&D spend include inward investment in fintech, for example?
I would imagine it does. The statistics don't necessarily disaggregate or the spend domestic versus inward investment.
Okay.
There is a fair amount of inward investment from your global majors, but there is also a growing body of domestic investment and investment into R&D. Yeah.
Okay, great. And then I have another question here: is what do you think is the drive? What do you think is driving the demand for this upward drive in innovation? So, is it spending power, infrastructure, deficit? What are your thoughts?
I think it's a combination of everything. Obviously, the most recent driver has been COVID, and the disruptions that we saw has been one of the drivers, but also just a desire of, remember the median age of an African is 18. So we're a young continent, young and very aspirant in terms of that. So young Africans see what everybody else around the world is doing and they want to be part of it. Many of the innovators in Africa have studied abroad. They've studied in the UK or the US or other parts of the world, and they're bringing that back. So the African diaspora plays a really important part in driving the aspiration to greater connectivity and innovation and development across the region.
Okay, cool. Well, thank you very much, Duncan. I'm just conscious of time and staying on the clock here. That was really interesting. If there are any other questions that come to mind for our listeners, if you'd either save them till the end or pop them in the chat and we'll kind of go from there. So thank you very much, Duncan, for your wise words and your insights, always very helpful. Next up, we have Dr. Jyoti Chowdhury, as I mentioned earlier. She holds that position of Professor of Information Systems at University of Hertfordshire. She has years of experience in particular areas, which we'll hear about shortly. And one of them is the adoption, use, and diffusion of innovative information and communication technology in small, medium-sized businesses and in large organizations. So, Jyoti, if you want to take it away, you have 10 minutes, and then we'll do 5 minutes of questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ivan, and a good afternoon to everyone. So, well, as Ivan said, so I do look at the adoption, use, and diffusion of innovation and information and communication technologies. And I'm also someone who is from Africa. Duncan mentioned the diaspora. Although I live here, I do make a contribution back home. I am from Kenya, so I do teach and also supervise doctoral students in Strathmore University in Kenya. So I do have links with Africa, and it's really, really wonderful to see there's so much innovation going on in Africa at the moment. I didn't ever realize that there was so much going on. And Duncan very correctly said earlier, you know, that we have this very young population. I was checking out the figures, and in Investment Monitor, they were saying that by 2050, we are going to have a very young population of between 25 right up to 50. And I've been speaking to some of my academic colleagues in other countries around Africa, Cameroon, Nigeria, Kenya, South Africa too. And one of the things they do talk about is that the young population is one that is very digitally literate. As Duncan mentioned, we've got all the penetration going on. It's not a very high rate, but still it's not too low. When I began researching broadband, that was in about 2002. At that time, broadband was not very penetrated. People were actually wondering, what am I going on about? Am I a mad hat here? But slowly, we have now got broadband everywhere. And so what we have found is that, well, the younger population being very ambitious, as Duncan again mentioned, they are traveling abroad and they're going back with the knowledge. And so in the West, we've got all these digital devices and products, which actually they're going back to implement in their home countries and are becoming entrepreneurs in their own ways. I've been working with a company in Nigeria. It's called Bloom Rights, and they have been trying out carpooling. Again, this is due to the mobile penetration, but also we've also got regulation changes coming in, because in many of the African countries, the telecommunication companies known as Telcos, now they're not only there to provide the telecommunications, but actually they've become financial institutions too. So there's been a change in the market. No longer are they just in the telecommunications sector, but they've also come into the financial sector. This has also meant that, well, in the financial sector, we've got new players coming in. And this has meant that there's more competition. The incumbent monopolists and all are changing. And as was mentioned, we are finding that actually mobile technologies are providing new ways of working in different countries. For example, I am from Kenya, and over there we do have people who come out to sell some of the fruits and vegetables. They're known as Mama Boga. And now these ladies, before they used to go around door to door, knocking on people's doors, we've got the products and all that. Now, because of the mobile penetration, they've got phones. And this has also meant that this is allowing them to start banking on the day. So with the telcos providing a way of getting some money on the day to purchase the products and services, they then get even messages from household consumers that this is what I want, and then they can deliver it. And it's not only them delivering it, it could be they are outsourcing it out. And so you can see that the mobile penetration has led to new changes. There are regulation changes, and this has just meant that things are changing a lot out in Africa. Now, I thought it would be quite a good idea if I could even give you some information just about some of the innovations that I've come across. So, as I said, I'm from Kenya, and what we found out there is that hydroponics has taken off. And this is how you can grow plants without the soil being there. And what has meant there is that artificial intelligence, big data, Internet of Things, the sensors, and cloud computing are allowing innovative ways of farming. And then we've also got poultry farming. So before, it was that the poor farmer would be coming out and finding out how the chickens are doing, if they're not eating, what's wrong, what isn't. But now, with these new technologies, poultry farming is on the increase. And this is the same even in South Africa. So poultry farming has been affected because of artificial intelligence, which then has an algorithm to identify what are the patterns of good and bad chickens and their behavior, and then leading to more eggs for the farmer, also more chickens for them. Then we've got the financial aspect there, fintech. So again, everyone must have heard of M-Pesa. And so where before it was just the bank providing the backing and people were taking them on, but now we are finding that the telcos have entered the arena, and this is leading to changes. And again, it's innovation which can lead to entrepreneurship. Then we've got the applications that are leading to disruptive technologies. I'm aware of many restaurants and hotels due to the pandemic. Well, if they couldn't have people coming in due to the apps, they were providing deliveries. And so this has provided another opportunity for entrepreneurship in Africa. So this is just for Kenya, but then in South Africa, we've got fintech again and apps. As well as that, well, there are many, many innovations taking place in the healthcare sector of South Africa. Before, even South Africa used to be a leader for heart surgery, but now they've also found new ways of getting healthcare delivery and services. So that's another country to look out for. Then I've got some colleagues in Cameroon, and they were telling me of how the startups, for example, Promagric is instantly analyzing the soils and the plants of farms to inform the farmers that there is some healthy soil here or not. And then they can try to find some ways of making it more sustainable. So you can see artificial intelligence, big data, Internet of Things, and cloud computing, of course, helping in reducing the farming losses. Then in many of the countries, there's a lot of crime and violence, and cars are stolen. And that's not only there, it's also happening here. But cars are stolen and carjacking is taking place. But again, with the aid of the new technologies, we've got car tracking going on. And a company in Cameroon that's specializing in it is MTN Tracking. So this is the way that I see that, well, we do have ways of getting Africa open for business. We need to get more awareness. Duncan's been very good. He talked a lot about all the opportunities. We've got new regulations coming in that are allowing entrepreneurship in different countries. But not only that, the diaspora going back, they're contacting their network in the developed countries. And that's how entrepreneurship is coming. But I'm hoping that this will allow you to understand and even consider Africa open for business and finding new innovative ways for doing business. Thank you.
That was great. Thank you very much, Jyoti. Some wonderful examples of the things that are happening, especially in the Internet of Things. I think this is a huge area of opportunity, not only for innovation, but also for supply, cross-country trade, international trade, and so much more. We have a couple of questions, so we'll jump in. And so let me just scroll up here quickly. Where are we? Oh, there we go. So is there any innovation that can reverse the corruption and debt in West African countries like Nigeria, as an example? That's a big question, by the way.
It is a big one. But I do see, for instance, the development of apps and the use of Internet of Things helping in bringing about innovation. Corruption, that's another thing. I mean, that is an issue that I think it's not only in the developing countries, but it's also something in the developed countries.
Yep.
And we need to look at. I know technologies allow clarity and transparency, but I don't think they've got to the point where you do have that much clarity and transparency to have a reduction or an elimination of corruption. Maybe a reduction, but
okay.
That would be one of the things.
Okay. And then I have a personal question here, and that is around the use of blockchain. Do you see that increasing or changing things?
It could change it, but I think that would be more within the younger people, because again, as I said, they're digitally literate. To convince the older adults, as well as even low-income families and the disabled, it might be that you will have a challenge, because they may find that there are some issues on how to use the devices, or even to form an understanding of what that technology is all about.
Oh, okay, cool. That's great. I have a question here from David Connor, and his question is this. What are the biggest opportunity areas for entrepreneurs, and which of these also provides the biggest social or environmental impact, in your opinion?
I would say the apps, along with big data, Internet of Things, and artificial intelligence, they will be making the biggest impact. And why I say them, because, well, with artificial intelligence and all, I know with blockchain, there is an issue about the environment. So that's why I don't say that would be helping a lot. It might in time we understand how it's going to affect it. But at the moment, they are talking about how it is causing an negative environmental impact. Okay. But with AI, Internet of Things, and big data, we will be able to use apps, and I do believe apps are the way forward. As I said, I'm working with this company in Nigeria, the carpooling company. So they have a website and they've got apps and they're developing themselves. They've got an investment from the United States and Canada, and that's how they're developing. And this is the way I see companies out in Africa taking off. I think even the tracking company is a great example of that.
Okay, brilliant. I have another question here from, and I hope I get this right, Ehimi. And his question is this: in recent times, innovation has played a role in the advancement of economic strength between Britain and Africa. How has innovation improved the agricultural sector for growth and global investment?
Okay, so the agricultural sector has helped in bringing about investment, because remember I gave you the example of hydroponics. And when organizations collaborate with companies here in the developed countries, or even with the academics, then what that means is we are investing in getting the new technologies, which also means that there is an investment going in and leading more to development because of the improved productivity. So that's how I see these things happening.
Okay, brilliant. And then I have a question from Eugene, who says, what do you see the potential of Africa's frugal innovations? So what do you see looking forward?
Okay, looking forward, there are frugal innovations, but that's because we're still trying to understand the potential of the technologies. As was mentioned, Duncan mentioned the drones, and then we identify other new innovations that will lead to innovation, increase in it. But I think also there will have to be new regulations and new agreements that will to a better demand for the innovation.
Okay, and then one final question, which is probably a bit of a humdinger, to be truthful, and it's from Kathy Ratcliffe, and it's how many of these innovations are available to the poorest?
Okay, so I know the apps, particularly for financial technology, fintech, are the ones that are really going out to the poorest. However, they are not understanding it too. So we need to increase the education, training, and knowledge on the potential of these technologies. And that's where we come in, because we then have to go out and talk to them, explain and show them that this is the potential, and also get great ambassadors who can show the potential. That's how we're going to get it. Otherwise, we're not going to get it. And yes, you are correct. Then we're not going to have it taking off.
Okay, brilliant. Anyway, I'm going to kind of cut it there. We'll come back to it if there's some time at the end as a platform and take further questions. But I'm now going to hand over to Brian Hall, who's the current chair of the IoD's World Trade Group, which kind of sits over all the special interest groups. But Brian has a long history of his involvement with the IoD, especially around the issues of governments, trying to promote business best practice, get people to actually do business with each other. Brian and I have known each other for a number of years. I hold him in very high regard. So Brian, over to you.
Okay, thanks, Ivan. Can you just tell me if you can see the screen okay there?
Yes, we are good to go.
Okay, so my role today really is as chair of the World Trade Group, which is a new initiative for the IoD. We're coming towards the end of our first anniversary. Is to talk to you about what we're doing, and really to talk to you about what we see and how we think the opportunity of Africa is becoming more available, and how we open that up for UK businesses. So let's just have a look at some slides and see how we go. Okay, let's see if the slideshow is going to work. Okay, so in terms of the Institute of Directors, for those of you who aren't aware, we represent thousands, probably about 20 odd thousand directors across the UK and internationally. The IoD is there for a number of reasons. A lot of people will know the Institute because of its work in educating directors and delivering professional development. But the value, I think, in this sphere can come largely, or does come largely, from the networking opportunities for directors within the IoD and to experts within the IoD. We boast and aim a number of highly informed special interest groups. We're here today with the Africa Special Interest Group. There are groups on Japan, the US, Turkey, across the globe. And we have those resident experts here in the UK, but equally we have contacts in country doing the sort of thing that Duncan has talked about, making sure that we're fully up to speed on the local environment and the local ecosystem. So there's huge value in the membership, but there's actually a greater value in the members, if you see what I mean. So, of course, the Africa Special Interest Group is the newest of the IoD SIGs. So our perspective, the view from the World Trade Group as we look at Africa, our view is very much informed by our members and their experiences, the stories they tell us, the companies that I'm very privileged to visit, and we'll talk about that in a minute. We're reaching out within the UK to embassies and to consulates. We're looking for engagement at a policy level, but very much on a get out there and do level as well. We're fostering country-led events, and we've just held a great event at the US Embassy on the US. We've just held an event at the IoD around Turkey, and we're doing more work with the Turkish government. And we are very keen to develop these kind of programs with the African governments and the African embassies here in the UK. So for those of you on the call who have those kind of contacts, we would really like to meet and work with those individuals and to develop those kind of initiatives. The international division of the IoD is growing now across the world. We're talking to the Far East about opening up membership bases there. We obviously have bases in the, if you like, the areas of Malta and Gibraltar and the sort of British protectorates, but increasingly looking to China and Japan and Africa. So looking to build our own membership in Africa so that we can build those close ties between the two. So working with the World Trade Group, the first thing I came to understand is that most businesses don't understand Africa. So I'm privileged in that I've had conversations with Duncan in the past. I've had some conversation with the Foreign and Commonwealth Development Office, a guy called Sean, who's based out in Africa, represents the Midlands. And then I go and talk to businesses. And the first thing is, first common myth is, I can't do business in Africa, I won't get paid. Well, of course, that's not true. I can't do business in Africa, it's corrupt. So it's corrupt. An entire continent of 1.25 or 1.5 billion people is corrupt. Wrong. There are pockets of corruption in Africa, and there are experts available who can help you avoid these, can help you be transparent, can help you with good governance, and keep you clear of that particular landmine. It's too big. I don't know who to speak to. Well, that's fair. It is pretty big. And it's undeveloped. I love this undeveloped because I suppose in my early days I might have bought into that. But there are 750 million people in Africa walking around with a smartphone. Well, there aren't 750 million people in England, Ireland, Scotland, Wales, the UK. So you can't have 750 million smartphones. So that's 750 million potential consumers. So one of the things that we're doing is we're working with the special interest group to try and grow the understanding around Africa. And I was privileged to visit a company here in the West Midlands who very quickly taught me a very simple lesson. Duncan, I know I should have got this from things you've told me in the past, but it's a very simple value chain. It's a very simple innovation chain. And that is where you can deliver power in Africa, you can deliver telecoms, you can deliver connectivity. And in the UK, I think, you know, we're growing to think about solar, but we think about power that comes out of the wall and comes through the grid. But I've seen companies now in the West Midlands who are building packs that fit in the back of a Land Rover that will power a 4G, 5G mast. And if you can get those packs into the remote areas of Africa, the remote areas of the continent, you can take connectivity to those areas. You can take science and technology to those areas, but you can bring innovation out of those areas. And I think that's what makes it so exciting. In terms of companies that we're watching do that, as I say, you know, companies who can put a power pack almost in the back of a rucksack. Companies who can build structures to produce a village centre, the roof of which drives the power, which drives the communication. And the appetite for this is huge. The appetite to be on the front foot, the appetite to innovate is enormous that we see when we look at Africa. And from my own experience, I sit on the board of a company called Memory Lane Games, which is a dementia initiative. Dementia is not a huge problem in Africa because of the average age of the population, but it is an issue. When Memory Lane Games opened up to international communication, the second country to step forward was Uganda. And more African countries have stepped forward than Asian countries, and more contacts coming from Africa than from in countries with much bigger problems. There is a real appetite out there to do business. We recently introduced a West Midlands company to Africa in terms of innovation and technology around cyber and the cyber threat. And very quickly, we saw them building 20, 30 contacts that they could talk to with the right advice, and moving on to a value chain of maybe 5 or 6 distributors or long-term partners in Africa, simply because they put their head above the parapet, they ask the right questions of the right people. So what we're seeing is a huge willingness from Africa to engage. The FCDO, the Foreign Commonwealth Development Office, are on the front foot as well. It can be frustrating because you just get used to dealing with the person at the office and they move on. But they're very ambitious. For a long time, China has had its hand on the rail industry there. And we have people in the FCDO now very keen to open up the rail industry in Africa to UK business, but also to open up UK manufacturing to innovations that are coming out of Africa. We're starting to see more tier 2 manufacturing now developed in Africa, but it still needs some expertise. It still needs some high-level components. And the UK has a fantastic reputation for delivering those, not only delivering them, but delivering them fairly, delivering them with less strings attached, or fewer strings attached, should I say, delivering them on a reasonable price base. And that gets us a good hearing in Africa if we have good products and good services to talk about. But this is a developing nation, and the IoD does look at the moral side of this question. And we think in order to balance this, we need to fully offer a two-way street. Africa is not just a market for us to go and sell stuff to. It's a country to learn, it's a continent, sorry, to learn from and to import from, as well as to export to. So the IoD very much sees the World Trade Group as a two-way street, both in terms of knowledge, expertise, and trade. We need to come with an open mind and an even hand. That's back to that fairness. Africa, to quote a nameless official from the FCDO, Africa has been stiffed too many times by the West. And we do need to come at this in a very fair way and an honest way. We need to appreciate the opportunities, and it's great to see the work that the Africa SIG is doing with events like this. And we need to invest time and energy. Lots of people understand that they need to invest finances in Africa, but that's Ivan telling me my time is up, by the way. To invest time and energy. It takes time to understand the market, to understand the way of doing things, and we do need to learn those markets. So the key is relationships and the opportunities they create. We're seeing that whether it's on a country basis, on a company basis, or on a director basis. Taking the time to build those relationships, to build that trust, and that you're not the latest white helmet that wants to come and stiff Africa. So Africa is already, I think, the biggest commercial opportunity out there. That's what we're hearing at World Trade Group. There are other countries in dealing with Africa that are a long way ahead of the UK, and we do need to catch up, and hopefully the IoD can play a small part in that. Brexit has asked new questions of the business community here, and we genuinely believe that Africa offers some of the most exciting answers to those questions. So we are big supporters on the World Trade Group of the SIG. We're big supporters at the IoD of doing things properly, and we're big supporters of people like Duncan and Jyoti and others who are trying to open these markets up in a fair and equal manner. And that's me.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Brian. If anybody has any questions for Brian, if you could pop them in the chat, that would be wonderful. It's a massive subject. It's great that we have organizations like the IoD, you know, in terms of opening things up to our counterparts in Africa, but also linking us here in the UK to these people in Africa. You know, we have, I have a question for Brian, and it's from Jean-Paul Kajangwe. Hopefully I've got that correct. And it's, how is the level of skills in corporate governance? Because we need that to be open for innovation in business. So I think looking at it, corporate governance and innovation, how do you see that?
So there's an old joke, isn't there, that, you know, when you became a senior executive, you got a company car, and when you became a director, they gave you a set of golf clubs. I'm pleased to say those days are a long way behind us. But there is a need for greater director education. I would say that, wouldn't I? Coming from the IoD standpoint, but you know, there are universities out there are MBAs out there that can help too. It's not just us. And I think educated directors make for better corporate governance, both here and in Africa. Now, of course, COVID has taught us that you don't need to come to Pall Mall to study. So we can now have directors based in Africa, South Africa, Kenya, Nigeria is not uncommon now, studying with the IoT digitally and picking up on that. But I think it falls to the sorts of people on this call to educate the directors they meet. So the most powerful advocate for change in the boardroom is the non-executive director, the person who comes as a critical friend of the business, who is there to ask questions, a great non-executive director, and ends every comment with a question mark. So getting to know the non-executive directors in your network, talking to them about Africa, teaching them the questions they need to ask in their boardrooms is the fastest way to improve the corporate governance for the continent, the fastest way to drive innovation. So what do you know about Africa? And if the answer is nothing, why not? Did you know there are 750 million smartphones in Africa? Did you know that some of the greatest health advances in app technology are coming out of Africa? Do you understand the appetite in Africa? Because a good non-executive will take those questions, they'll bottle them, and in the next board meeting, they'll fire them at their executives. The executives are the ones with the levers to make the changes, but it's the non-executive directors that can change the agenda, that can move the conversation towards Africa. Okay, great. I have a question here from Aya, I think is how you say it. And the question is regarding the balance between country-based special interest groups and industry specialist industry groups or industry groups, so that we could build a common platform amongst multiple countries and key stakeholders for both sides. Yeah, so that's a conundrum I'm currently battling with as sort of chair of the World Trade Group, because we do have sector-specific, aerospace-specific, or consumer goods or food and agriculture-specific SIGs within the IoD, and then we have geographically specific special interest groups. And I think it's where interests align. I think it's where agendas cross over, but it's about connections. So if we grow a strong connection in Uganda, for example, on health, then we need to get both the Africa SIG and the Health SIG aligned on those contacts. Where we build a contact in Mozambique or South Africa on rail, you know, we need to get the segment specific SIGs involved as well as the Africa SIG involved. It's about an alignment of talent behind a sort of coalition of cause, really. And, you know, the continent could eat us for breakfast. I think you can fit the UK into most small corners of most African countries. So we need to look at where we can benefit the continent and where the continent can benefit from us. We can't be all things to all people.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I've got another question here from Eugene, which is, what support is the IoD providing to promoting services to African C-suite executives?
Okay, well, this is going to sound like I'm ducking the question, but I actually think that is one for myself, well, actually one for Joel with my support to take on board and actually to come back to the group and say, here are the ways that we can support C-suite executives. And we need to look at ways that we can support them commercially. We are a commercial organization, but we also need to look at what ways we can help them on a pro bono basis, or what resources are available, how we can just make streams of information available. The FCDO, bless them, although they do tend to rotate and play musical chairs quite a lot, do have some fantastic resources, and we can bring those to play. And of course, we can also supply mentorship as well. There's nothing to stop UK directors pairing with directors based on the continent of Africa and doing, you know, 360-degree mentorship, one upon the other. Why not?
Yep, no, absolutely. Fully endorse that for sure. And then one final question, which is from David Fisher. Hopefully I put this in context. Transport is essential to successful trade, either way. Trading opportunities ensure countries can grow and thrive. Since BA stopped flying direct to Southern African countries, excluding South Africa, of course, there's been a dramatic fall in trade with the UK and Southern African countries from 8 billion in 2011 down to 2 billion by 2019. They are, I'm not sure which company it's from, but they are looking to reintroduce flying direct to Southern African countries from the UK, and they would need financial support. Do you have any comment on that?
So I love digital, and I think you can do a lot of pre-work before you do a country visit using digital. I think there are organizations out there that can introduce you to the right people so that when you get there, your time is spent to its greatest value. But I do agree that there is nothing beats being there in person. I think directors across all countries work well on a handshake, and I think that matters. So I'm pleased that flights are coming back. In terms of financial support, probably a bit above my pay grade in terms of airlines and countries sponsoring them and the rules around that. But I think airlines are pretty mercenary. If you can grow the connections, if you can grow the relationships between a nation, and maybe we start with a professional organization like us and an embassy here in London, and maybe that gets a conversation going, maybe that gets an airline interested. You know, maybe those are the small things that we can do. But the airlines will go where the traffic is. I do agree, though, for trade, sometimes it's chicken and egg. But we can do what we can do, is I suppose my answer.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much for your insights there, Brian. Most helpful. I'm just conscious of time and trying to stay on the clock and be as professional as we can. So I just want to very quickly say, as the IoD, the SIG group is, we have a LinkedIn group, which you can join, whether you're a member of the IoD. We would encourage you to search us out on LinkedIn and join us if you can. Just something about the special interest group. You know, we created this to improve UK and African trade by stimulating business opportunities, increasing networking, and growing awareness of British businesses in Africa and African businesses in Britain, as we've heard many say here today. But what is important is Africa is coming of age as a continent and ready for investment, be it investment from the UK into Africa, or us buying their goods. We need to make this a two-way street, as Brian has already mentioned. You know, we have the African Union, 54-country continental free trade area. You know, that's a massive step in terms of UK-Africa free trade. You know, it's going to take some time to get off the ground, but there are predictions that business expenditure should rise to about, what do we have here, to about 6.7 trillion by 2030. Now, these are all interesting numbers, but unless people are actually doing business with each other, they're just a theory. So as some of you may know, you know, according to official figures, you know, just 2.5% of British trade is with Africa. Now, that's shocking, considering that we have, I think it's 24 countries, somewhere around there, that were ex-colonies. You know, they speak English, they do business in English, all those things. Yet 2.5% of all British trade goes to Africa. That's crazy. So I think we need to change that. So having said that, you know, the IoD Africa SIG group is a national group. It is hosted by the IoD in Berkshire with the support from IoD in Yorkshire and the Northeast. And we partner with Africa's institutions and African diplomatic missions here in the UK. And what we are hoping to do is provide a platform for members who are already doing business in Africa or interested in doing business in Africa. If you want to know more, please contact us. And that just leaves me to say a couple of thank yous. So thank you to our to Duncan Bonnet. Thank you. Thank you to Brian Hall, and thank you to Dr. Jyoti Chaudhary for your time and investment. Joel is our Joel Papula is our current chair, and B. Oloko is the vice chair. Jyoti Chaudhary is one of the committee or founder committee members, as is Amici Nosofo, myself, Ivan Vickers, and Lawrence Jagedi. So with thanks from the committee, we just want to say thank you for your time. Hope you found the discussion fascinating. And if you want to follow up with us, please just drop us a note and we'll get back to you. We will be sending out an email with all the contact details and a summary of some of the topics discussed today.